Hello and welcome to Elvenhome, and to this edition which really concentrates on the design and mock build of the control panel. And you'll see where my thinking is going of how I try to make that as straightforward a job as I can. And also a running session at GWR this week with some new filming angles. So I'll be interested in any comments you may have on those. But let's first of all see what happened after the last video to the plan that I thought was really the final version. Before I talk you through the changes that were made to the design of the control panel top, can I just say thank you to everybody that gave me comments about the control panel and the design of the control panel, and indeed comments on all things that were given. They were all, without exception, really helpful. But thanks particularly to Chris at 4 Oak Street, Tony at the Heritage Line, Ewan Blackwood, Alan at Hayridge, who all gave me really useful comments about spacing things out a bit more perhaps. Ewan in particular suggested that actually some of the LEDs were a bit too close and possibly a bit close to their switches, and that I might want to give a bit more space. And a number of people mentioned making enough room for the box that sits underneath the switch that is below the panel, which is obviously bigger than the switch that you see coming through the panel fascia. So having taken some Ewan's comments on board about spacing things out, and I thought that with the box underneath of the switch that I had given quite a bit of useful room. So I produced the version that you're seeing now, which moved things around, and I thought that probably would get me where I wanted to be. And what I had in mind to do at that point was to punch out all these holes and feed the switches through to see that they all fitted through the paper. But then a thought occurred to me that actually what I could do is try and represent the size of the boxes on this plan. The box underneath the switch is an oblong in shape, and the longest edge is 13 millimeters long. Underneath there is a locking washer. And the diameter of that locking washer is about 12 millimeters. So what I've done in this version is to add a box of 13 millimeters square underneath every switch, so that I could have a good representation of how much space there would be from each of the switch boxes underneath and the nearby LEDs or whatever. And this was extremely useful because it showed me that in fact I was cruising for a bruising, really, in that there was on the left hand side, if you look where the gasworks 1 and 2 is at the bottom left hand side, you'll see there's 3 switches there that are really close to each other. 2 of them might have made it in, but I don't think the third one would. And then moving across to the right hand side, in the bottom right hand corner, you'll see that the Underhill Tunnel Junction slip north, that's UTJ slip north, is really very close and probably overlapping part of the bezel that's holding the one or more of the LEDs. So as a result of that, I made further changes, including making a change to help me understand better the double slips and what was controlling which on the double slips. So as you'll see with this image, I've taken away the areas where there could be conflict. One of them was just about actually moving things around to create space. The other was that the switches for the slip I put on the line, but the way double slips work, which are 2 sets of points back to back. When you throw us through one of those switches, you weren't controlling the two lights immediately near that switch, you were controlling the two lights the other side of the slip, because that's how it works, that's how the thing is wired together. Putting them on the line of route made it really rather confusing. What I've done now is to put the switch by the lights that they are controlling. That'll be a little bit odd because the bits of the slip that will move will be at the opposite end to where the switch is. But what the control panel is there to tell me is where a train is going to go now that I've thrown that switch. And that actually works much better and gives a lot of space. It solved one of the problems where the switch was butting up against the LEDs. So that's where I got to. But I decided after that I would punch out all the holes. And because I don't want to drill all the holes in the perspex, a bright idea occurred to me. And I'll take you onto the desk now and show you where I've got to so far with that bright idea. What you can see in front of you is the final version that I'd settled upon after all of my moving things around, where I've punched the holes out using the leather punches, which I'll show you. I'm going to do a section later in the video showing you some of the things I've acquired to help me deal with wiring and things, which you may find of use to you. One thing which I didn't mention specifically in the last section were the pieces that I've put onto the plan here, which is the way you show on a Mimic panel that this is a double slip. And I got those from a document that's available on DCC Concepts website, where they make available for you lots of images essentially, which are all essentially single lines that you can cut and paste to make up your own Mimic diagram. And I'll put a link to that in the description to this video. So as I was saying, I've punched all the holes out, and initially my thought was that I would feed the switches through into this paper version. Having had to go through 3 or 4 versions after what I thought was the final one, I thought you really do need to do a mock run at drilling all the holes out. But I didn't want to drill them in the perspex. I know I've got 2 pieces of it, but that's in case when I'm doing it for real I screw up the first one. So I got myself some A4 3mm plywood, and once I'd punched the holes out, I put a dot in the center of each of the holes and then drilled them out, and that is what you can see in front of you. What I'm going to do now is go away and put all the switches and all the LED bezels into this so that I can see what it looks like both on the front and on the back. Just to tell you that the tool that I use to drill them out, I don't know if you've ever come across these before. Let's see if you can see what I'm seeing. There we go. Is a cone drill. And I got this partly because I did do quite a bit of research in how to drill perspex. I've never drilled perspex, but I did have a vague notion that it's a bit of a devil to drill. And the beauty of these, of course, is that it starts small and then bores an ever bigger hole depending how far you go in. The hole you're supposed to need is 6mm, which is this step here. But I found after I drilled a 6mm hole that they really didn't like to fit through. So I went up another millimetre and did 7mm, and everything seems to be going through quite happily. But that was a useful exercise, one because you're also not supposed to use brand new drill bits on perspex. They need to be a tiny bit blunt. So that has already drilled the however many holes are here, 76 I think. And it was good practice in using that cone drill, because obviously you need to know when to stop, and the way I dealt with that, and you can just see a bit of it, is some black marker pen around the 7mm. So that showed me when I got to the point I had to stop. It wore off over time and you just had to keep reapplying it, but that worked really quite well. So I'm going to go off and put everything into this and then show you a bit later in the video what it all looks like. Here you can see the completed control panel mock-up, which has proved far more valuable than I expected, but shows the value, and Ian at Ian's Engage will attest to this, of experimentation before you commit yourself to the final version. This looks pretty much as I expected it to look, and of course it does help now to see the switches and the bezels. So it's quite hard on the diagram, although I know what the different things mean. It's quite hard to visualize what that will look like, and I'm quite content that in general appearance and everything it looks absolutely fine. But it has thrown up an interesting issue with the drills that I was using, because you may recall that I said when I drilled a 6mm hole with this cone drill, and they're quite clearly marked to be 6mm on the cone drill. If I bring that in, see if I can get it to go into focus. This is quite tricky. Doesn't really want to do it. Maybe if I come a bit closer. Take it from me, those are marked, and that one there says 6mm. But when I drilled a 6mm hole, I couldn't fit either the switch or the bezel through. So I took it up to 7mm and then everything went through. And what I've discovered, having used my vernier calipers, is that this is not 6mm, it's 5.7mm, not 6, which would explain why nothing would go through there. But also that the thread on the switch is 6.5 millimeters, which explains why that wouldn't go. I mean, that wouldn't go through 5.7 and it won't go through 6. The bezels, I discovered, must have a 6 millimeter hole, and 7 millimeters is too big because of the way the bezels work. If I bring one of these up to the light, see if I can get this in focus. That's a bit better. You'll see that there's what appear to be ridges around the edge of the bezels. And what they are actually is plastic clamps. So when you put this into a 6 millimeter hole, those clamps push inwards and hold the LED in place. And I tested, because I thought, you know, one of the things to test was that the LEDs would be retained within the bezel. And sure as eggs, it fell straight back out again. And there was no way on earth it was going to hold. Which left me in a bit of a quandary, because, you know, you do expect drills to be the size. Now, as it happens, I have some drills that are used for countersinking. And it's of a kind of drill which can be used on, well, they can be used on perspex, but cone drills are thought to be better because they open an ever bigger hole as they go through. So on a test piece, I drilled a 6 millimeter hole with this, and this is 6 millimeters, and that's this test hole. Popped a bezel through. And it went in really snugly and retained an LED with inside it. But that's when I discovered that the threads are too wide. So I do need a 7 millimeter hole for the switches, but I definitely need a 6 millimeter hole for this. And it made me go back to my other cone drills that I had. The one that I used first of all, which was quite hard to see where you only drilled a 6 millimeter hole, was also under. That was 5.7. But there was a third cone drill, which is this one. And this 6 millimeter section, which is quite big, is the right size. And it will be easy to see once you've been through a 3 millimeter piece of perspex before it gets to 8 millimeters. Because obviously if I drill an 8 millimeter hole, I'm in deep trouble. So I'll be trying this. I'll use this first of all, and I will do some testing in wood. I've done one, which was this one, using this drill, and that also allows a bezel in, but not the switch. So that was a useful exercise in itself, and that really, I think, means that in terms of the general plan, it's going to work, I think, he said. There is a change that I've got to make, which is unconnected with the basic design, of moving Grey Havens in. Loop has got to come in, and those two lights have got to come in, because I need to leave some space inside for the way I'm going to fix the way I've given myself a puzzle. The puzzle is, I've been thinking about how do I actually wire this in. Wiring all the switches to this in a way is fairly straightforward. Lots of wire, but if you do it in a sensible way, you know, you'll get through it. But all that wire is going to be sitting on the control deck. And if I need to get in to take this off, if everything is wired in, it would mean unwiring everything. So essentially, what I've got to do is put this panel together and fit it onto the layout in a way which I can unplug and remove the whole panel if I needed to work to replace an LED or to sort out a wire that's come loose or to replace a switch. See, planning ahead, this is the thing. And I've come up with an idea, and as a sneak peek for the idea, it involves a piece of wood of that size. And then we'll get up onto the layout just to show you the diseased idea I have of how I can make this essentially a standalone unit that plugs in to put it onto the control deck. Here you can see the panel, the mock panel, in its position. pretty much exactly the position it will be in once I've taken away everything that sits below it. It's quite difficult to get an idea of how much space I have underneath this board, and as best I can, because of all the stuff that's on there, you think, well, there really isn't very much space, but this is A4 A3 width, and the area, unshaded area in here, is the total floor space just of, if I lift this off, just of that. If I put that in there, that's what the total floor space is there. So I was always content that I had the space to fit the 7 units that you saw earlier. But as I was saying, this has a completely closed back, of course, if you seal it right down to the base, and that gives you problems, it seems to me. Either you have long wires so you can lift the board up when you need to get at it, and that just means lots of wire underneath, or you've got to have some way to be able to hinge this. The alternative was to make this a self-sustaining unit which plugged into bits to get power. That presents its own problems, of course. If I take this away now for a moment, you'll see that, as right from the beginning, I used here because more in case I ever needed to take the top board off whilst I was still building it. So these obviously on the top here unplug from the ones below, but there's no reason why I can't sort of reverse that, and that the wires from the switches, the on-off switches, will replace these anyway. These wires here are the ones that go under the board and are wired into, using chock blocks below, and you've seen the rat's nest, into these switches. So in a sense I'm replacing like for like. I do of course have the added problem that because of the units I'm using, I've got a set of wires going from the switches to the units and sets of wires going from the units to 2 LEDs. However, I think it will be possible to suspend those units on a piece of wood below this panel, and that's because the position I had it in raises it above this side piece by 36 millimeters, which is the width of one of these. So there'll be one sitting there, and I will get a piece of wood and cut it so that another one is sitting here, and that will allow me to screw the panel into this wood to retain it. What I'm thinking of doing is screwing the panel into this wood and then having underneath here dowels that fit into the piece of wood that's sitting here, and likewise there, so that will clip in here. And I think the wiring from the units to the LEDs is permanent, so that doesn't need any kind of plug system. The only thing that needs a plug system is getting power to the units, and that I think will be fairly easy to do. And I've already put together in card a unit that would sit under the board but not obviously foul the bottom, and so that is the position I've reached at the moment. And the beauty of that will be that I can plug everything in fairly easily, and if I need to get in, I can get everything out easily too. It will also make wiring things so much simpler if what I'm effectively doing is wiring everything sitting at my desk with the panel upside down, as long as I remember that it's upside down. Otherwise panic will ensue when I put it into into the board. But I think I know how I'm going to have a go at doing things and testing things as I go along, I think, but we'll see. So that's where I've got to. That brings you up to date. There's no further update as yet on the underground layout. I'm still waiting for the CAD of the design of the baseboards so that I can approve, and that's pretty much. The chap that's doing them did say that it would take a while for him to get that bit done, but once I approve it, it'll be about 10 days after that the boards will be with me. And given that the lead time on just getting boards made in other places is months, I'm really not in any desperate hurry there, because I'd much rather he got it right than something came and I had to keep revising it. So if you've got any comments on what I've said, what you've seen so far, please do let me have them. As I said, I'm not going to rush doing this panel. I think I'm getting close to being able to actually start work on it. I just need to get the wood to be able to make the underneath bit that will be slung below the control panel itself. And it's Model Rail Scotland. By the time I next speak to you, we will have had Model Rail Scotland. Really looking forward to that. As it happens, I'm going to be staying in Glasgow on Thursday night, so I'm there all day on Friday. If you do see me and you want to say hello, please do feel free to say hello. And I'm looking forward to seeing a number of people, Ewan and Donald from Highlander 66, Tony from the Heritage Line, and Nat from, no, not Avon Valley, Austin Valley. So if you've liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, because there's going to be plenty to see over the next few weeks, I think. But until I speak to you again, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.